Thank you very much. Deputy Ewan Murphy.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Moran. You're very welcome. Excuse me, just to continue on from that line of questioning from Deputy O'Donnell, you said earlier that the structure of the bailout was wrong at the beginning. So just to be clear, what are you talking about there when you talk about the structure of the bailout? Are you talking about the rates, the pace of the adjustment? You mean wrong for Ireland, or could you just clarify that?
No. What I meant by that specifically, and I mean there was an adjustment to the amount of time to do the adjustment anyway of 1 year, but what I meant specifically was that and if you'll forgive me because I don't know the numbers, but let's just to make it easier to understand, put two numbers on it. Let's assume that the interest rate that was being charged to us on the bailout was 6%. Okay, and it was set at a level that was effectively 2 or 3% above the cost of funds of the European partners. And the reason was that they had a fear that if we actually got cheap money, because Ireland was never going to be AAA in the short term, that we might decide that this was something we should stay on. And we'd keep on it even though the country recovered. The IMF rules are slightly different. They actually apply a surcharge at a certain point, so the interest rate steps up so that you don't stay on it. Our sense was that if you ran our numbers on a 6% number, which was really creating a 3% benefit. And I don't want to be quoted on the 3%, but the benefit, the margin that the European lenders were getting was now a profit to those governments. Mm-hmm. And it was designed to stop us from wanting to stay on the programme. We had no reason to want to stay on the programme. But more importantly, by giving us the benefit of their cost of funds at the rate at which Europe could borrow them, it meant that our ability to succeed increased significantly, because for each year that we were on the programme debt, we now could find ourselves in an environment where our debt sustainability was better. And that was why, and the length of it and everything else, that was why the interest rate reductions and the maturity extensions were all part of that negotiation.
But sticking to that point then on the interest rate reductions, I mean, what led the way for that change in thinking with our Troika partners that actually would be more beneficial to have a lower rate nearer to the cost of borrowing to help us out of the programme quicker? Was it an initiative from the Secretary General of the Department, or where did it come from?
The way in which, I mean, I can't refer to it in my written statement, and I think actually Kevin, I saw some of his testimony this morning, referred to it as well. Our approach, and to his credit, he would have led the department at that time, was one of building up a level of trust with the Troika partners, sharing the problems, understanding where we're going, and figuring out what, frankly, we might do differently. Right? The bailout was discussed in an element of secrecy, less people involved, less thinking about it. As I said in my own statement, people were learning. Right? You even get a couple of months down the road, you start rerunning the numbers, you start looking at it. We knew how much the PCAR was going to be. We knew how much we were putting into the banks. That meant we had a credit of 10 billion we hadn't used, that we thought might have used. You rerun the numbers, you say, Jesus, we can get here, but we're not going to get here easily, and why don't we actually ask for this recovery? Part of the process is actually building up credibility. If we had gone in on day one looking for that, I don't think we would have gotten it. Once we had done the PCAR, once we had actually not burden shared with the Anglo banks, right, then you start to build up a relationship with your lenders, and you build up an openness, while at the same time, politically, and indeed with the staff, that Jim O'Brien and the others, they were reaching out to European capitals across Europe, trying to build friends, because what happens is you have 18 people making a decision. And if you have all 18 on your side, you get a change. If you have all 17 against you, you don't. And so, this comes true. The reality is that the crunch point that year, if I can recall it correctly, was around the Greek situation. But part of it was that the seeds had been sown from here. We'd spoken to Portugal. They knew it as well. They were having the same conversation. So this the revelation, if you want, or the mist of fog slips over this issue, and suddenly people say, that's helpful. Now what can we do to help out Greece? We can do that, but we can't do that without actually giving it to the people who were talking about this for the last couple of months anyway. And everybody benefits at the same time. Okay. And that's the European process. But our tactical approach, which is by contrast to some others perhaps that are ongoing at the moment, was to build a relationship of trust and mutual understanding with the Troika partners. So they were on our side for this conversation, because these were ultimately people who wanted it to succeed.
Thanks, Chair. Moving on later then through the programme and onto the promissory note situation which was discussed earlier, how important was the change at the top of the ECB to helping improve that situation for us and maybe improve our ambition in relation to getting something done and getting something done sooner rather than later?
It's hard to pinpoint one particular issue, right? I mean, I didn't have a very long kind of history. Well, sorry, in the sense I wasn't in the department for most of the previous situation, right? I think it is a combination of a lot of other issues, right? You have to recall that by the time we got there, by the time we got there, we had a whole series of Troika people, including the ECB officials, who were coming here once every quarter, with whom we were interacting all the time, who had become supporters of what we were trying to do. So there were more people in the system, both in the ECB and elsewhere, anxious to try and find a solution to that problem. I mean, there were declarations about finding resolution of the Irish banking debt. I mean, this was all iterative. Ultimately, there was a new president of the ECB who was willing to entertain things that perhaps others wouldn't have entertained in the past, who has shown since then, frankly, on a European scale, that he's willing to entertain things that perhaps people would have said were impossible 4 or 5 years earlier.
But do you recall going on a meeting to Frankfurt?
The time, so we'll just take a supplementary.
Going to Frankfurt, I think it was in July 2012, perhaps, with the minister. And I think it was the first meeting, a first delegation to meet the new president. And it's been reported that following that meeting, then there was this new reflection on. I think the quote might have been, "This is someone we can do a deal with," and then that's when things went into process in terms of doing something with the promissory notes. Would that be a fair reflection of the outcome of that meeting?
I think that was a good meeting. You know, I mean, we had a very open discussion. There were some kind of, as these things happen, right? I mean, without remembering the specifics of it, I mean, you get a particular position of both sides, you make your points, and then you gauge, as in any negotiation, whether you think you've actually gotten some people to understand where you're coming from.